That's another problem. We have no cake. So this morning I want to talk about something that every one of us faces every day, and that's problems. Do you feel that you have your fair share of problems?
Christians don't have problems.
Are there any Christians in the room that have problems? Okay, I think they do. All right. Now, before you or near you or somewhere, there's like little vanilla colored 3x5 cards, if you can get one. I want you to just write down 1, 2, or 3 problems that you're going through this week. That's on your mind, that you're thinking about, that you're worried about. Nobody's going to see it, it's just you. There should be some pins on the back of some of the chairs. You might have to walk around to get them or share them. So just write down a couple problems that you're having to deal with. Something that's taking your time, something that's taking up space inside between your 2 ears that you've got to worry about, you got to think about, you got to stress out a little bit about it. You got to deal with. So while you're writing that down, I'll just be doing my message while you're writing it down. There's some back, look in the back of some of the chairs, you'll see some other pens you can share, trade them around. All right. Now, do your problems sometimes overwhelm you? Take up a lot of your time? Sometimes you find that you can hardly deal with one problem when another problem will pop up. You haven't even finished dealing with the first problem. Now you got a second problem. Now you got the third problem. Now you got a fourth problem. For example, maybe you've got a bill that's due at the end of the week. You ever had that problem?
Yep.
And you don't have any money to pay it. And your child is sick. So you've got to have money to get prescription for your child. And you've got to find the time to rush to the pharmacy when you get off of work at the end of the day to pick up the prescription. But on your way to work that day, you get a flat tire. And you find out you don't have a spare. So you call AAA and you find out that your card has expired. You haven't renewed it. And you really can't afford not to get to work that day because you can't afford to lose a day's pay. Another problem. So you call your boss, and your boss has got a kind heart. He's going to help you with your problem. Okay, Cassandra, write down 2 or 3 of your problems.
What?
You got to write down some of your problems on a little manila card. So you call your boss, and your boss is understanding. Your boss says, well, don't worry about it. You can stay late and make up the time and not lose any money. But if you stay late, you can't get to the pharmacy in time before they close. You can't get your child's prescription. That's a day of problems. I don't know if you've ever had days like that. So what are you worried about today? What kind of problems are you facing today? And for most people, it's not just one problem that you're dealing with. You're dealing with multiple problems. You know, maybe it's job, maybe it's school, maybe it's work, maybe it's your health, maybe it's your husband, maybe it's your wife, maybe it's your ex-husband or your ex-wife. Maybe it's your in-laws or your kids or your home or your car. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on and on and on. And usually it's not too difficult to deal with one problem, and it's not too difficult to deal with 2 problems. But when you get that 3rd problem, and then that 4th problem, and then a 5th problem added on top of it, that's when your knees begin to buckle a little bit. You begin to get a little bit anxious, a little bit stressed out. you're troubled, you're worried, how are you going to deal with all of this? And that's when anxiety will start setting in, it's filling up your mind. And you begin dwelling on the difficulties and the troubles that you're experiencing. So worry happens when we're concerned about our troubles, and that's all we can think about. We can't think about anything else. And worry is a sin. And it's a sin for two reasons. First of all, it displaces God in your life. Because you're worrying, it's like God doesn't exist, that God has no part in this. That God is not going to help you get rid of your problem. You're just trying to solve the problems on your own when you're worrying about it. The second is that it distracts you from the things that really are important in life, things that really matter. Because your thoughts and your actions are all dwelt and concentrated on the problem. And you can't do, and you can't see, and you can't think of anything else. And you're strangled by your worrying. Now in our reading this morning, Peter gives us the answer for our worries. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7. This is a different version. Casting all your cares upon him, for he cares about you. That's it. Cast all your cares on him. Now, that's a biblical theme throughout the Bible. And if I had my PowerPoint, I would start showing you all these great verses. So I'm going to read them to you. First is Psalms 55, verse 22. Cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. Psalms 56:3. When I am afraid, I put my trust in you. Psalms 37:5. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act. Philippians 4, this is verse 6. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. So any of these verses can help you to shake off the worries that you've got in your life, that you can cast it to the Lord. Because God desires that you not be strangled by your worrying and the stresses in your life. And God's done everything that he can do to help you, because he says, give them to me. I care about you. 1 Peter 5 says, cast our cares on the Lord. Now the word cast means to throw off with vigor. Cast it off. Throw it off with vigor. You don't want to hang on to it. You want to get rid of it. So how are we supposed to dispose of our anxieties and our troubles and our stresses in our life? Well, we're supposed to give our worries to the Lord. You've got to shake loose your problems, and you've got to release them to the Lord. You've got to cast your cares to him. Now, I've had to deal with my own problems lately, some really heavy problems lately, and I'm sure you have too. I've had so many problems that I began to worry, and I began to wonder, what am I doing? What am I doing that so much opposition and so much torment is coming against me? What am I doing wrong? Why is this happening? Why are so many things diverting my time and attention away from what I need to be doing? And I've got to put my focus and my thoughts on these problems. And I began to think, maybe there's a pattern. There's a pattern to my problems. What I'm facing, if I can just get an idea what is going on, if I can see the pattern, I will understand the root and I'll know how to deal with these problems. And everything that was troubling me, everything that was adding stress to my life, it was biting me, it was eating away at me. Was taking away my life. So I wrote down my problems. just like I asked you to write down your problems. At the time, the biggest problem on my list was my wife, Ginger. You know, she was physically in bad health at that time. And I was worried and I was fearful. And because of this, the anxiety drained me physically and emotionally and spiritually. And I was stressed out because I thought I might lose her. That was the kind of problem I was dealing with. And it was about that time that I came across an article, a story, a sermon, as a matter of fact, from a pastor named Author John Gossip. Now, Pastor Gossip lived in Aberdeen, Scotland, and this is in 1927. He was 54 years old. He was the pastor of Beech Grove Church. And his wife died. And he didn't know how he would survive. He didn't think he could be a pastor anymore. Now, he's been a pastor for a long time. And he's helped many other people through their own times of crisis and through their own problems and their own troubles and their own bereavements. But how could he reconcile his own loss? How could he rely upon the Christian faith that as a pastor he claimed to profess? And how could he face, and what would he say to his congregation? Because, you know, they all loved him and they all cared for him. And Pastor Gossip, he's remembered today because he wrote one particular sermon, and he preached that sermon in 1927. And it was the first sermon that he preached after the death of his wife. And he titled this message, "When Life Tumbles In, What Then?" What do you do then when your life tumbles in, when all the problems of the world crash in on you? And in it, he struggled to reconcile his Christian faith with the loss of his wife. And he was troubled, and he was anxious, and he was stressed, and he was depressed, and he was grieving. And these are his words from his message. He says, "I do not understand this life of ours, but still less can I comprehend how people in trouble and loss and bereavement can fling away peevishly from their Christian faith. In God's name, fling to what? Haven't we lost enough without losing that too? Without losing our faith too? To many people, religion is a fair weather affair, as Pastor Gossip put it. A little rain and it runs and crumbles. A touch of strain and it snaps. But if we turn from our faith in our time of trouble, what shall we turn to? Have we not lost enough without losing that too? So if we turn from our faith, what do we turn to? What is there? And I'm so blessed that I did not have to write that on my list. Now, when I looked at my list, two things occurred to me. First, most of the items were not going to drastically change my life. You know, they're just problems that you face every day. They're just normal problems. It's terrible we have normal problems. Day-to-day problems, they'll take care of themselves. And yet the things on my list, as trivial as they were, having a cumulative effect, so many of these little things happening at one time, it kind of weighed heavy on my soul that time. And second, I have no power to solve and change most of the things that were on my list. At least I couldn't change them immediately. Some of the things on my list are going to take care of themselves by themselves. Other things will be taken care of with God's perfect timing. And still other things on the list were just ongoing prayer requests. And God was hearing my prayers, so I just had to wait for him to fulfill them. They were being taken care of. I was just too anxious. I want to right now. I want to see the results right now. And then after I wrote my list, I wrote 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7 at the bottom of the list, to remind me that I don't have to solve my own problems. I cast all my worries and cares on him because he cares for me and he cares for you. So if you're experiencing your fair share of problems, let me encourage you to write down your own list. Take a look at it. You don't need to give the list to anybody else. Just take a few minutes to write down your list, and when you get done, write 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7 at the end of the list. And then once you put your list of problems together, rip it up. Rip up the list. So take out the little cards that you have your problems on, and I want you to rip them up.
Say again the verse.
1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7. Cast your problems on the Lord because he cares for you. So if I can get someone to go around and just collect all the ripped up problems, rip them up, no one can ever see them, make it, shred them. The very act of ripping up the list is part of what it means to cast your cares on the Lord. So the fact that you're ripping up these problems and you're throwing them away, you're casting them to the Lord. But just like everything else that you do in life, you have choices to make. You can either carry all these problems and worries by yourself, or you can cast them to the Lord. You can give them to God. What do you want to do with your problems? You want to carry them? You want to deal with them? You want to solve them? Or you want to give them to God and let him take them away, and he will solve them. Now, when I think of problems, there's so many people in the Bible that had problems. I mean, the Bible's just cover to cover full of problems. And God dealing with those problems. There's problems all throughout the Bible, but when I think about problems in the Bible, two individuals that come to my mind is Job and the Apostle Paul. So let's take a look at the problems that Job had. So if you will, get your Bibles out, turn to Job 1. We're just going to read a few verses. Job 1, Old Testament. Now I'm going to be reading the New Living Testament, which is the Blue Bible. So let's look at the problems of Job. You think you've got problems? Let's see what happens to Job. Now, the story of Job took place 4,000 years ago, but it could happen today. It could happen tomorrow. There's nothing that years make a difference in what happened to Job. And the story of Job is a story of undeserved suffering. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do bad things happen to good people like you? Why do babies die? Why are innocent people killed by crazy people, madmen? Why are the righteous, passed over for promotion? Why do these evil people come into power? The book of Job does not answer those questions with any kind of theoretical explanation. I got that earlier. There's no theoretical explanation of why this happens. It answers it in a story. And we're invited to examine one man. We're looking at one man, Job, whose life tumbled in around him, just like the message from Pastor Gossip. Why did this happen? And what did Job do about it? The book of Job has a very simple beginning. The first 5 verses tell us 3 things about Job. So let's look at verse 1. Verse 1, we find that Job was a righteous man. It says, "In the land of Uz there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright, and feared God and shunned evil." So Job was a good man. Second verse, we find that he was a rich man. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys. And he had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. How rich was Job? It was kind of hard to convert how rich he was, because how do you convert hundreds and thousands of sheep and goats and oxen and donkeys and servants into today's terms? Nowadays we've got a magazine, Forbes magazine. They come out every year with the most richest people in the world. Well, if Forbes had published their magazine 4,000 years ago, Job's would be at the top of the list. Verse 4 and 5 says that Job was a religious man. It says, his sons used to take turns holding feasts in their homes, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When a period of fasting had run its course, Job would send and have them purified, meaning a sacrifice would take place. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, "Perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." This was Job's regular custom. So here we have one of the rarest of all creatures. We've got a truly wealthy man who loved God more than he loves all of his money and all of his riches. And not only that, we've got a father here that takes responsibility, spiritual responsibility for his children, making sure that they were covered in the sacrifices in case they had sinned. So here's a man who truly had it all. You couldn't find anything negative to say about Job. And that fact is crucial to understanding the story. What happened to Job happened because he was a good man, a righteous man. And nothing in the book of Job makes sense unless that is true. It's a case study of the suffering of the righteous. Why did bad things happen to good people? As hard as it may be to understand, it was his righteousness, it was his prosperity that brought about the enormous suffering that we're going to see, the problems that fall upon Job. And none of the suffering, none of the problems were deserved. And then Satan then enters the story in verse 6 and 7. So the scene changes from earth to heaven, and Satan has a conversation with God. Verse 6, it says, "One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, 'Where have you come from?' And Satan answered the Lord, 'From roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it.'" Now, if you were to ask the average Christian today, where is Satan? They're going to say Satan's in hell. But if Satan was in hell, you wouldn't have all the problems and all the troubles and all the stress that you're going through today. Because that's where he's going to be one of these days. He's going to be off this planet Earth in hell, so that we won't have those problems. You know, Satan is alive and well, and he's roaming planet Earth. That's why you've got problems. That's why you're stressed. That's why you have anxieties. The earth is under his power and domination. Satan basically throws this question to God and to the reader. He says, "It's not hard to believe in God when everything is going your way." Anybody can believe in God when things are going your way. But as Pastor Gossett pointed out in his sermon, when life tumbles in, what then? So the scene shifts from heaven to earth, and Satan has received God's permission to put Job to the test. But notice in verse 13, when does this happen? It says, "It happens on a day when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at his oldest brother's house." So in a moment of great happiness at a family reunion, when you would least expect it, that's when Satan strikes. That's when the problems strike in your life, when you least expect it, when everything seems to be going well. Man, it'll hit you, bite you. So verse 14 says, "First the Sabeans steal Job's livestock and kill his servants." And in 16 it says, "A fire of God destroys his sheep and kills more of his servants." And then verse 17, "And then the Chaldeans steal his camels and they kill more of his servants." Like I said, he's got a lot of servants. And then fourth, in verse 18, it says, "A great wind hits the house where his children are feasting and kills them all." Job had some problems. That was a bad day. That was one day. Problems came one right after the other. And if you read the text 3 times in verse 16, 17, and 18, it says, while he was still speaking, saying what his problem was, bam, he got hit with another problem, and then another problem, and then another problem. You know, his vast wealth, it was vanished. His empire crumbled. His workers, his servants, they were all murdered, and his children, they were all killed. All 10 of his children. I can only pray that the misfortunes and troubles that Job faced, you will never face in your lifetime. Someone once said, if we threw all of our problems into a pile, and then we got to see everybody else's problems, we would probably go in and take our problems back out of that pile. Because a lot of people have a lot worse things going on in their life than you do. So when tragedy strikes, when problems bite into our sanity, and it comes again and again and again, and we think, that's got to be the worst of it. And then another one comes. And just when it seems like nothing can get any worse, the bottom falls out again. Job lost everything that he loved in a single afternoon. Thought I had problems. The only thing left to Job's story is to read how Job responded to these problems. How do you respond when your problems bite you? Verse 20, it says, at this Job got up and he tore his robe and he shaved his head. Well, these are the actions of a man whose heart has been broken. He's grieving. He's hurting so bad. He's just in so much pain, emotionally and physically, spiritually. And then he fell to the ground and worshiped. Praise God. So here's the response of a man of faith in the face of unexplainable tragedy. He weeps and then he worships. Cast all of his cares, all of his problems onto God, because God cares for him. He's lost it all. He's lost his wealth, his workers, his children, everything that he counted dear to him. He's lost it. And he praises God. He doesn't lose his faith. As Pastor Gossip said in his message, we do not gain if we turn away from God in our time of trouble. If we turn away from God, we lose our only ground of hope. The Apostle Paul takes these thoughts even further. This is Romans 8. Let me read it to you. It says, what can separate us from the love of God? Nothing. Not life, nor death, nor tragedy, nor heartbreak, nor suffering, everything that Job was going through, everything that you might be going through. We are forever connected to his love. He cares about us. With cords 1,000 times stronger than steel, nothing can separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. That's the way the Apostle Paul lived his life. And Paul had more than his share of problems. If you ever read Apostle Paul, he was always in prison, always being chased out of town, throwing rocks at him, trying to throw him over cliffs. Well, we can read about some of these problems, that just one problem after the next in Acts 27 and 28. You don't need to turn there, I'll just kind of summarize it, but you do need to turn to Acts 28 in a few minutes. So the story that's taking place in Acts 27, Paul's out there evangelizing, he's building churches, he's teaching the people in the churches, and then he's arrested. And he's going to be taken to Rome to stand trial. He's arrested because of his faith. And to get to Rome, Paul and the centurions and the guards, they board a ship. So Paul has now lost his freedom. He's bound in shackles. He's being boarded onto the ship. He's a prisoner, so he's not got some wonderful accommodations on the ship. They probably throw him in the dirtiest, dankiest, smelliest, watering, foulest place on the ship. And they're going to island hop their way to Rome. During the voyage, the ship encounters a tremendous storm. Jeez, another problem is not only is it stinky here, but now I got rain coming in and pouring down on top of me. I can't sleep. And the winds and the waves are so fierce that everybody on board believes they're going to die. So he's down at the bottom of the ship, and he can hear everybody yelling and screaming about the storm, and we're all going to die, and he's bound with chains. How is he going to survive? How is he going to save himself? At about midnight, at their darkest hour, they decide to sit out the storm and throw overboard 4 anchors to hold the ship in place, hoping that if they can save the ship, they can save each other. They can continue their mission on to Rome. But in the middle of the night, Paul notices that part of the crew is going to abandon ship. They're leaving their duty stations, and if they leave the stations, that puts everybody on that ship, they're vulnerable. They're all probably going to lose their lives. As a matter of fact, an angel approaches and tells Paul that if these people leave the ship, you're all going to die. But if they stay on, everybody will live. So Paul brings this to the attention of the centurion guard, and because these men were going to abandon ship, if they leave, everybody's going to die. So the centurion guard cuts loose all the lifeboats. So now they're on a ship in the middle of a storm, rocking like crazy. They all think they're going to die, and you can't even have a lifeboat at your disposal now. You either are going to live or you're going to die. When morning dawned, they saw a bay with a beach, and he wondered if they could just get to shore. If they could get to shore, they could leave. They could all live. So they decided that they're going to try to run the ship aground. So they lift up all the anchors, and they lower the rudders, and they raise the sail, and they're heading full speed towards shore, trying to get there as quickly as they can. And the bow of the ship hits the beach. It's kind of like a head-on collision. And the force and the waves and the wind are just so strong that it just rips the ship apart. Now, the soldiers don't want the prisoners to escape, so they want to kill them all. They just survived all of this, and now they want to kill them. They could have killed them before. They wouldn't have to go through this. But the centurion guard, the officer, he likes Paul. And he doesn't want to see Paul killed, so he tells that none of the prisoners are going to be killed. And they all jump overboard and they swim toward this island. So now if you turn to Acts 28, let's see what happens. So we pick up the story in Acts 28. When you think that everything is over, that nothing could get any worse, that you've already been through the rough of it, what can happen now? Well, let's find out. Verse 2 says, the people of the island were very kind to us. Wow, something good has happened. It was cold, they were soaking wet. It says it was cold and rainy, so they built a fire on the shore to welcome us. And as Paul gathered an armful of sticks and was laying them on a fire, a poisonous snake driven out by the heat bit him on the hand. The people of the island saw it hanging from his hand, and they said to each other, a murderer, no doubt. Though he escaped the sea, justice will not permit him to live. And this is Paul's response. Paul shook off the snake into the fire and was unharmed. He shook off the snake. He shook off his problem. He cast his troubles to the Lord. He threw it into the fire. 1 Peter 5:7, the Hebrew word for cast or casting is eperipto, which means to throw upon, to give it up. So I want you to remember, when you've got troubles that are biting you and making your life miserable, when the devil comes out of the woodwork and attacks you, some other way, I want you to shake them off. Shake off those problems. Shake off those worries. Shake off those stresses. Don't let the devil's poisonous venom destroy, kill, or destroy your life in any way. Maybe he's trying to put depression on you. Shake it off. Give it to God. Maybe he's attacking and biting into your marriage. Maybe he's biting into your finances. Shake it off. Give it to the Lord. If that job doesn't come through, well, shake it off. He's got a better job waiting for you. If after years of going to church with you, your child, your children, they're now young adults, but they don't want to go to church with you any longer, shake it off. Don't let that be a problem. Don't let that trouble you. Don't be stressed off about it. Shake it off. Turn it over to God. He cares about you. He cares about them because he knew them when they were in their mother's womb. He's got a relationship with them. If the doctor comes and gives you a bad report, shake it off. He's only practicing medicine. The one that you're worshiping, the one that you have faith in, he created you. He created your cells. He created your bones and muscles and tissues. He knows how they're all designed, how they're supposed to come together and function and support one another, how the organs rely on each and every one of them and can't have anything go wrong without it affecting the rest of the body. He knows how to fix it. Shake it off. Give it to him. Because we have power over the works of the devil. We can bind, we can cast him off. Cast him off. We can destroy his works. So if you're under attack, if you're experiencing problems, if you're troubled, stressed out, depressed, if you're anxious, I want you to exercise your authority over him and over his works and cast him out. I want you to shake it off. I want you to turn it over to Jesus. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we had an amazing worship team here at the River Room on a Saturday night. Key-centric with Joshua Williams. And Joshua Williams wrote a song called Shaking It Off. Go ahead and get ready to play that, Jason. Shaking It Off. So I want to play that for you now. Go ahead and play it whenever you're ready. So whenever you're experiencing a problem, whenever you are troubled, worried, tense, can't sleep, don't know what to do next, I want you to think about this song. As a matter of fact, stand up, get ready to shake it off. Everything you wrote down, shake it off. I love these guys.
Shaking off your problems, the difficulties you might have had this week. Sometimes just gotta shake it off, you know? So it's really simple.
Shake them off.
It goes like this. Alright, it's like this. Here we go. I'm just shaking it off. I'm just shaking it off. I'm just shaking it off. Just shaking it off. Just shaking it off.
The devil is crippling you with your problems and heartbreaks and stress.
You guys try it.
Do what Paul did. Shake it off.
Just shake it off. Hold on, already, okay. Just shake it off.
He's trying to keep you out of the church, trying to keep you away from the works of God.
Just shake it off.
Shake it off.
Just shake it off. Okay, I think you guys got it. Alright. So, in a second, we're about to go crazy. Okay, we're about to go like, I mean, kind of wild with this one. So, I need you guys to help me out.
He's discouraging you with one trial after another, making you think you'll never see the end. It's too big to break through, it's too troubling to overcome. Rise up, shake it off. Cast it to Jesus. Shake it off. Don't allow the devil and all of his flunkies to conjure up works that are going to cripple you emotionally or physically or spiritually. You gotta walk by faith. You gotta rise up. Shake it off.
Sign up for the email list, get all the offers, and get all the fun stuff.
Know your problems.
Working on Christmas Eve.
You feel another bite, shake it off. Shake it off. 2 Corinthians 10:5 tells us, not only shake off, but you got to shake off what's going on in your head also. It says, cast down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bring into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. You can't let the devil get into your head either. And when he's attacking you and you got problems and stresses, you can't start thinking of despair and how are you going to get through this? I'm never going to get through this. You start having doubt. So if you're going through something like that right now and it's hard to deal with, you've got to use your you can't let the devil use your imagination against you. If he does, shake it off. Cast out that imagination. Don't allow him to fill your mind with negative thoughts. Don't let him fill your mind with despair about your situation. Instead, put your mind on Christ. Put your mind on his promises. God says he cares for you. Give me your problems. Philippians 4 says, whatever things are true, honest, just, pure, lovely of God report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think of these things. If we fill our mind with good thoughts, if we fill our mind with God's promises, there won't be any room for the devil to creep in with his thoughts and his doubts and his fears. So you need to cast the devil out of your thought life. Shake him out of your head. If you're starting to think and you're starting to feel depressed, you gotta shake it off. If you're feeling sick and you begin to think, is God gonna heal me? You gotta shake it off. Shake it off. When you think you can't make it anymore, you can't take it anymore, you don't think you can go on anymore, you can't make it, how are you going to overcome this? Shake it off. God says you are a victor. Walk by faith, put your trust in Jesus, and shake it off. Amen. That's my message. So shake it off. Think about this music. Shake it off. Now I've got some announcements. So we're going to